that if we waited one more day, Benghazi, a city nearly the size of Charlotte, could suffer a massacre that would have reverberated across the region and stained the conscience of the world. It was not in our national interest to let that happen.
President Obama making the case not just on moral grounds to intervene in Libya, but also on national interest grounds. I'm joined by Elliot Spitzer. Elliot, it was interesting to hear the president really try to define the mission in a way which I think may surprise some people, that regime change is not part of this mission.
I think that, in fact, has been the inherent tension throughout this confrontation. Is the mission humanitarian, or is the mission one of getting rid of Gaddafi? The president has said Gaddafi must go, and then it is jarring for people to hear, but that is not the military mission. You heard Senator McCain coming back to that fundamental point as well. If that is our mission, well, let's accomplish it and declare success and then move on. That is not what we have done. Anyway, let me bring in the always brilliant Fareed Zakaria, CNN's own analyst of all things international. Fareed, this was in many respects a very subtle speech, and I think buried in it, or maybe not so buried, there is the beginning of a doctrine about how President Obama views the use of force. How do you see this?
Elliot, I agree entirely. It was actually an important speech. It was quite carefully and cleverly constructed. It had a humanitarian angle, it had a strategic angle, but at the heart of it, what Obama is saying is that there are places in the world where the United States does not have vital national interests, where we have not been attacked. But we have limited interests, and we are going to try to find a way to have some kind of limited military response. We're going to do some of the things ourselves. We're going to insist that allies do other things. We're going to insist that we have an international mandate. And so what he's suggesting is, look, given the circumstances, the Libyan opposition asking for help, on the verge of a massacre, the Arab League asking for it, the UN endorsing it, the United States could not have done nothing. But that does not mean that he is going to accept the idea that this is an open-ended commitment. What John McCain was suggesting is, frankly, strikes me as a very dangerous argument, that in a place where we have clearly limited interests, clearly non-vital interests, the United States and the president should put an open-ended policy of military escalation and say, we will do whatever it takes to get Muammar Gaddafi out of office. Well, that is, frankly, the way we got into conflicts like Vietnam, where in order not to be humiliated, we couldn't back down. What Obama is saying is, we have limited interests, we have a limited military mission, and he intends to keep it limited. The reference to Iraq, I think, was very pointed and clear in that respect.
You know, Fareed, the distinction you're drawing was one that he made later on in the speech between the core interests, where the United States would go in unilaterally with military force without hesitation, and then what he, in a more diminished context, he referred to merely as interests and values. And he said, in those contexts, we will construct the international support group that we have here, the coalition that we have in Iraq. Now, the subtlety there is important, but it also raises problems. I had a series of questions that I thought the president needed to answer tonight. The first one was, why are we there? And I think I totally agree with you. He answered that brilliantly. The second question, though, is how do you define success? And it's not so clear to me in the context of the humanitarian purpose that he articulated for the military. How do you define success? And then the third question, when do you know you can leave? How do you define those boundary lines?
This is the treacherous part about any kind of limited military intervention. And what he will have to do, in my opinion, is find a definition of success that does not involve the achievement of, you know, some kind of Jeffersonian democracy in Libya, the elimination of Muammar Gaddafi and all his cronies. Because if you wait for that, and if you say we will continue to press forward and escalate until we reach that mission, that is precisely what causes you get into a lot of trouble. Now, it's fair to say that you can argue we will continue to press the Libyan regime, but that doesn't mean we have to keep ratcheting up the military option. The military is just one tool that we have to enforce this policy.
Look, but Fareed, here's the problem I have, and I think it is a subtle, very academic, a slightly defensive speech perhaps, but as long as Gaddafi is in power, isn't the humanitarian threat going to continue for the Libyan population? And that is why it seems to me, as long as Gaddafi is there, the military is going to say, we can't leave because then there will be slaughter, there will be bloodshed. So how do you then separate out the humanitarian purpose from the stated, but not the military purpose of getting rid of Gaddafi? And that is where I think there's a tension. And unfortunately, even after the speech, significant confusion about how far we go and until when we stay.
remember, Elliot, after the interventions in Bosnia and Kosovo, which were both regarded as successes, Slobodan Milosevic, the dictator of Serbia, was still in power. He survived both interventions. So, again, the core here is to create some definition of success that allows you to say you have achieved some level of success and press, continue to press. The most important part about the speech, not the most important, but the news-making part about the speech, which frankly most people have missed, is the President of the United States said, we are going to assist the Libyan opposition. On Sunday, Secretary of Gates on Meet the Press said, no decision has been made as to whether we will help the opposition. The President is now saying he will. So in other words, there is a policy now to shift the balance of power and to assist those against Gaddafi in all kinds of ways. The air campaign is just one part of it, and we will continue to press him. Gaddafi, has many resources, but if an international coalition stays firm, it is not that expensive to maintain the no-fly zone. If the Libyan opposition is helped, it will throw him and his cronies off kilter.